The first several news stories that we're going to be covering in the Crowd Management Doctor series this time are going to be primarily in the United States, where there have been a number of issues from fans dying from falling from escalators to shootings outside of games. There will also be a second monthly update, or 2-month update in this case, where we're going to be covering 3 tragedies that occurred overseas. These tragedies included the death of over 600 people in Indonesia, Seoul, South Korea, and in India. These were 3 major tragedies that occurred in the span of 1 month in October, but reflect how critical crowd management is to this day. A fire erupted in the parking lot of Miami's Hard Rock Stadium as the Dolphins took on the New England Patriots. This resulted in the destruction of numerous vehicles. According to the local NBC affiliate, at least 8 cars were ablaze, producing a large cloud of black smoke that was caught in numerous videos posted to social media. Someone had left a hot grill under a car, and that car caught on fire and spread to the others in the parking lot. A Lollapalooza security guard has been arrested after allegedly faking a mass shooting threat in the hopes it would let her leave work early. Jana Williams, 18, was charged with making a false terrorist threat on Friday, July 29th. Williams purportedly sent her supervisor an anonymous message over text now that said, "Mass shooting at 4 p.m. location Lollapalooza. We have 150 targets." The supervisor left to alert their supervisor, who in turn contacted the FBI. When the supervisor returned, Williams claimed that her sister had found a mass shooting threat on Facebook. The supervisor then asked to see the warning. According to prosecutors, the 18-year-old quickly typed out a new post under the name Ben Scott that read, "Massive shooting at Lollapalooza Grand Park, 6 p.m. She did not actually post that message, but instead took a screenshot and sent it to her supervisor. Soon afterwards, the FBI and Chicago Police Department used an emergency disclosure request on the Text Now threat and realized that Williams had sent that threat. According to court documents, the emergency disclosure request returned an Apple ID cloud account and an IP address. The information revealed the account belonging to the defendant. Prosecutors say that Williams was brought in for questioning and almost immediately admitted that she had fabricated both warnings in order to get out of work early. Bond has been set at $50,000 and Williams must consent to electronic monitoring before she is bonded out. Her next hearing date was scheduled for August 8th. There's no follow-ups to that. Nine people were killed and 20 were injured at a stampede after a concert in Guatemala. At least 9 people died, including 2 12-year-old children, following a stampede at a rock music festival marking Guatemala's Independence Day. The tragedy unfolded in the early hours of Thursday, September 15th, in the city of Guatemala, about 125 miles west of Guatemala City. More than 20 people were also injured in the incident, with several requiring hospital treatment for suspected fractures. Thousands of concertgoers were reportedly in attendance at the annual outdoor show in Central America's most populous country. The event, which started on Wednesday afternoon, was reportedly sponsored by a beer maker and held on a field often used for music shows. The Associated Press reports that a number of attendees were crushed during rock band Bohemia Suburbana's closing performance as people tried to leave as others were entering. Because of the rain, there was a lot of mud. I think because of this, the people couldn't move and they fell, according to one witness. The report adds that Guadalajara's city manager, Amicla Rivas, said that the event had a permit, but organizers did not have a grip on security and crowd control. That is always a major concern. The next story involves a Maryland high school that enacted a new security plan after a brawl broke out at a football game. According to a local ABC affiliate, they now require all school-age students that are not part of the 2 participating schools in an athletic game have to attend the game with a chaperone. The revised plan includes successive tiers that will be enacted should the students and fans not abide by their first tier. Tier 1 will be implemented starting the Friday after the rules were implemented and requires the following. Students and spectators must sit in the stands to minimize those gatherings during games. The school system enhanced its no entry policy, and spectators will not be allowed into a game after the second half. Backpacks are no longer allowed during athletic events. Enhanced protocols regarding silence were also implemented. The school indicated that if Tier 1 doesn't work, the plan moves to Tier 2, which includes the possibility of limiting participation to students in the participating schools. For teams that participate in activities such as the fight or brawl, the school system will impose serious consequences. Game times could be impacted, as an example. The third tier would be enacted under extreme circumstances and includes the possibility of closing concession stands and only allowing parents to participate in the games. Also, there are schools that now across the United States are only holding games on Saturdays in front of no fans at all to reduce the amount of violence. A 14-year-old in Philadelphia was killed on September 27th, and 4 other students were wounded in a shooting near a Northwest Philadelphia high school athletic field after a football scrimmage. Police said players were walking off the field behind Roxbury High School after a scrimmage involving 3 schools when at least 2 people opened fire shortly after 4:30 p.m. before fleeing on foot. Police said a 14-year-old shot in the chest was pronounced dead shortly after 5 p.m. A 17-year-old was shot in the arm and leg, and a 14-year-old was shot in the thigh, but they were listed in stable condition at the time of the incident. No information was immediately available about a 4th student taken to a local hospital. Another student grazed by a bullet was treated at the scene. The shooter sat in a parked SUV for about 6 minutes, waiting for the teens to round the corner behind the school. When they did, 5 shooters, who Smith said also appeared to be juveniles, got out of the car and began firing. 1 person remained in the car, Smith said. Schools used to be a safe place, and to see that now our young people can't even come in scrimmage games and be shot is totally unacceptable, said Kevin Bethel, head of school safety for the Philadelphia School District. The shooting occurred hours after Mayor Jim Kenney signed an executive order banning guns and deadly weapons from the city's indoor and outdoor recreation spaces, including parks, basketball courts, and pools. The order is the latest attempt by city officials to regulate guns inside city limits, something made difficult by Pennsylvania's preemption law that bars municipalities from enacting or enforcing their own stricter gun regulations. A fan fell Sunday, October 2nd, from an escalator inside Pittsburgh Acrisure Stadium and later died from his injuries. As reported by the Associated Press, Pittsburgh Public Safety stated that at 4:40 p.m. Eastern Time, Pittsburgh Police and Emergency Medical Services responded to the male attendee who fell from the escalator. He was taken to a local hospital in critical condition, then later died from the injuries he suffered. The man's identity has not been released as of Monday, but as of the filming of this video, it had been released. Fatal falls within stadiums are an all too common occurrence. In August, a woman died from injuries suffered from falling from an escalator railing at Denver's Empower Field at Mile High. It was the stadium's 3rd fall-related fatality since 2015, according to Athletic Business. A massive crowd crush happened over the first weekend in October and was triggered by police firing tear gas after an Indonesian soccer match. The ensuing panic and rush to the exits left at least 130 people dead and hundreds more injured. Police attempted to control the crowd after a match between host Arema FC of East Java's Malang City and Persebaya Surabaya, according to the Associated Press. Police beat people with sticks and shields and then began shooting tear gas into the crowd. At that point, panic ensued and people began rushing towards stadium exits. It was among the deadliest disasters ever at a sporting event. President Joko Widodo ordered an investigation of security procedures, and the president of FIFA called the deaths a dark day for all involved in football and a tragedy beyond comprehension. While FIFA has no control over domestic games, it has advised against the use of tear gas at stadium, especially soccer stadiums. Home team Presbaya had lost the match 3-2 in front of a crowd of 42,000, and some of the arena threw bottles and other objects at players and soccer officials. At least 5 police vehicles were toppled and set ablaze outside the stadium. No fans were allowed from the opposing team due to a history of violence at Indonesian soccer matches, yet there still was a tragedy. The home team had beaten the visiting team annually for at least 23 years, and that fueled the environment that resulted in the chaos that followed. When the tear gas was fired, some fans suffocated and others were trampled. The Associated Press reported that 34 people died at the stadium, including 2 officers. According to the Associated Press, the game is already among the world's worst crowd disasters, including the 1996 World Cup qualifier between Guatemala and Costa Rica in Guatemala City, where over 80 died and 100 more were injured. In April 2001, more than 40 people were crushed to death during a soccer match at Ellis Park in Johannesburg, South Africa. The venue was poorly constructed, and we're talking about the venue in Indonesia, with only 16 exits, which impacted fan movement. Later research showed that 45 rounds of tear gas were shot into the crowd. Crowd crush kills at least 151 people at Halloween festival in Seoul on October 29th. A mass of mostly young people among possibly close to 150,000 partygoers who gathered to celebrate Halloween in Seoul became trapped and crushed as the crowd surged into a narrow alley, killing at least 151 people and injuring 82 others in South Korea's worst disaster in years. Those killed or hurt were mostly teens and people in their 20s, especially young women. The dead included over 20 foreigners, whose nationalities were released shortly thereafter, including 2 Americans. The death toll could rise further, as 19 of the injured at the time were in critical condition. An estimated 150,000 people had gathered in Itaewon for the country's biggest outdoor Halloween festival since the COVID pandemic began, and strict rules on gathering were in force. The South Korean government eased COVID-19 restrictions in recent months, and this was the first big chance to get out and party for many young people. Itaewon, near where the former headquarters of the U.S. military forces in South Korea operated before moving out of the capital in 2018, is an expat-friendly district known for its trendy bar, clubs, and restaurants, and is the city's marquee Halloween destination. Witnesses say Itaewon's streets were so densely clogged with people and slow-moving vehicles that it was practically impossible for emergency workers and ambulances to reach the alley in time to treat the injured. It was not immediately clear what led the crowd to surge into the narrow downhill alley near the Hamilton Hotel, a major party spot in Seoul. One survivor said many people fell and toppled one over another like dominoes after they were pushed by others. The survivors, including one surnamed Kim, said they were trapped for an hour and a half before being rescued, as some people shouted, "Help me," and others were short of breath, according to the Seoul-based Hankore newspaper. Another survivor, Lee Chang-koo, said she saw about 5 to 6 men push others before 1 or 2 began falling, according to the newspaper. A woman in her 20s, surnamed Park, told Yonhap that she and others were standing along the side of the alley while others caught in the middle of the alley had no escape. It should be noted that there were phone calls to the police as early as 3.5 hours before the tragedy really unfolded, with people complaining about the density of the location. Thus, there was a lot of information upon which the police knew or should have known that there was going to be an issue in this case. This is going to lead to significant changes in how South Korea will move forward with dealing with events going forward, especially preparing for events. One thing that was raised by this incident was that everyone was pointing the fingers at other people. No one really said who was involved, and everyone's claiming that it wasn't me. It was somebody else. Other people were in charge. There was no permitting. There was no designated authority in charge of it. It was like it's just a spontaneous thing, even though they've known it's been occurring for years and years, and restaurants and bars throughout that area were preparing for it and expecting a lot of people. This incident also shows the value of data. The metro for South Korea in Seoul identified that there were about 120,000 people that had taken the metro to go to this area for the partying. There's also an estimated about 30,000 plus people that went there with either buses, their own personal vehicles, or maybe walked to the area. So that gave them an idea of about 150,000 people that might have been there. The police were only staffed with about 170 people. Now, the police had indicated that they were hoping to get close to 200 officers to work the event, but they just did not have enough personnel. For a crowd of 100,000 people, you need to have at least 400 trained crowd managers. If there's going to be 150,000 people in attendance, you're going to need 150 trained crowd managers. As I said, there are only 170. Thus, they were woefully inadequately staffed for this event, and this is going to lead to significant changes going forward for major events in Korea, but also it should apply to other venues as well. A bridge tragedy in India showed how pedestrians were attempting to sway an Indian suspension bridge in the moments before it collapsed, killing at least 141 people. This was a tragedy that happened basically on the same weekend as a tragedy in Seoul. Rescuers expect the death toll to continue to rise after the bridge fell apart in the western state of Gujarat on Sunday. The majority of those killed were women, children, or elderly people. A local official told the BBC almost 180 people were successfully rescued. However, in an overnight operation involving national and state disaster relief personnel and the Indian military, they were able to rescue people. Rescuers on boats plucked victims from the dark water around the bridge and ferried them to the river's muddy banks, where volunteers and soldiers waited with stretchers to receive the living and the dead. The 754-foot bridge over the Machuchu River, which was built during the British rule in the 19th century, had only been reopened 4 days after months of repairs when the tragic incident occurred. Video footage of the seconds leading up to the disaster appears to show people attempting to sway the crowded structure as others were taking photos. The cable on one side of the bridge then snapped. It plunged the crowd around 33 feet into the waters below. Authorities have made 9 arrests in connection with the disaster. People detained include ticketing clerks, managerial staff, and 3 security guards who allegedly failed to regulate the crowd before the bridge collapsed. 2 people who had been awarded a contract to repair the bridge were also detained. Ashok Kumar Yadav said, adding that further arrests are likely. According to one source, the bridge collapsed as too many people in the midsection of the bridge were trying to sway it from one side to the other. This really shows that it's so important to regulate the number of people in an area, especially if there is the potential for crowding, and that's what we see in a number of these events. Thank you for watching this video. It was extremely long compared to our other videos that we have, and the reason being is that September and October were unfortunately a very tragic month, with numerous people that died in crowds, and almost all of those deaths could have been prevented. What we need to do is we need to make our venues as safe as possible, and you play a critical role in that effort. So thank you.